I'd like to invite everybody to a moment of sound. So, and then we can go into conversation. So, I have with me here my favorite instrument, which is called oud, O-U-D. It means wood in Arabic, and it's the grandfather of the guitar in some way, and the father of the lute. And I will play for you something that it's completely a free improvisation. I have no idea what I'm going to play, but I've planned that the first half of my improvisation will be in one particular mode and the second half in another. And what I'd like you to do is just relax and listen to the sound. Just meditate on the sound, just listen to the music, let the music do whatever it does to your body and mind. And just be aware of how do you feel in the first half versus the second half of the music. And it may be sensory, it may be something you feel in your body, a sensation, it can be a sense of place, it can be thoughts, images, feelings, emotions. All this is good. Observe it, just be a witness. Just relax and observe the movie that goes through your mind. And be aware only about how did you feel and think and sense in the first half versus the second half. That's the whole assignment. So the question is, how did you feel in the beginning versus how you felt at the end? And I bet that you felt differently. I feel different. My voice is even different. I even feel almost afraid to speak because the ending had a certain kind of a grace to it. And when I play this to students in different universities, different institutes, what people say is very different from each other, but they all go describing the very similar phenomena. Some people saying in the beginning they felt in a dark place, and at the end they felt in an open prairie. Some people say they were under the ground in the first half and they were outside in the second half. Some people say they felt grief, they felt longing, they felt pain, they felt yearning in the first half. Some people say that they were in the desert. And in the second half, they felt some kind of a light, some brilliance, some quality of grace. And what is interesting is that all those things are pointing to the same thing. This piece of music was a journey from darkness to light. You can call it whatever terminology, whatever comes to your mind is fine. But that journey was intentional because I chose two different musical modes from the Middle East. The first mode is called Makam Hijaz, and it's used to evoke yearning and longing, and it has a darkness to it, some percentage of darkness. And the second mode that I chose is called Makam Ajam, which is the same like the major key in Western music. And Ajam, Makam Ajam, or the major mode, has this perfection, roundness to it, and lightness and brightness to it. That is what our brain makes out of hearing those sounds. And so what is the amazing thing about this experience is that we cannot really ask everybody on the call to tell us what they felt, but I trust that most people experience some kind of a journey like this, emotionally, intellectually. And what is amazing is that I did this journey to you, to all of you, on purpose. It's intentional, and I changed the impact of the music on your brain. I chose particular moment in time to make that change, and I chose a particular impact to impact your brains. And this is how film music works. That's how we do music for theater and film. The director tells us what the director wishes the audience to feel at a particular time, and that's our job as film composers to make the audience feel a particular way. And all this point to the incredible impact and the power of sound. Because think about this like that. Right now, I went through the internet all the way to Ireland, to wherever you are in the United States, and I actually touched your brain with sound. But I managed to enter your brain with a sound wave and to cause your brain to feel and think and release certain hormones and neurochemicals at a particular time that I wanted your brain to do that. So this is much more intimate than a hug. I actually entered your brain with sound. And this is a great demonstration of the power of sound. If we can do this with sound, we could use sound as medicine.
Well, you might not be able to hear from the panelists, but you can hear from me since I'm the other
I'd
panelist.
love to have a dialogue. I'd love to have a group discussion. I'd love
So,
to hear what you have to say.
so I would say when you first started playing, I felt of a very ancient place or something very ancient. It was D minor, and then as you transition to G major, some C in there, I said, oh, okay. And that, it's so interesting. It's fascinating hearing you talk about using sound to kind of manipulate people's brains and feelings. And it's like reverse engineering, because when I teach students, I always say music came first, theory came later. Because we studied the whole of classical music, and we see big generalities, and theorists make generalities, right? Major usually is happy and minor is usually sad. I mean, that's oversimplifying it. It's more nuanced than that. And I remember a theory teacher saying how the different intervals had different energy and would make you feel different, like the minor second feels very different than, and he said, a fourth, he said, it's like, this or the fourth tritone, and then you can sit. So it's fascinating that it seems like what you're talking about is you take those principles and you create music with a very specific goal, like you have to for movies to really match what the storyline, the narrative. So I think that's amazing. That's fascinating. And one thing I learned at the Zuckerman Institute is that music is something that engages the brain in a very unique way. It's comprehensive. It causes your memory center it can trigger your memories, trigger taste and smell and visual images. And and of course the whole rhythmic thing and emotions. So I see music. I mean, I feel like the brain is really the final frontier in terms of understanding human physiology, because just being able to pick up my metronome here, they just barely understand the things that happen in your brain, because there's depth perception, there's understanding how much this weighs and knowing how much force to pick it up with. So I think music is something that really integrates us, and that's why it integrates us within and with each other. Like you were saying, you reached through the internet to all over the world, and that's it's amazing.
It's amazing, yeah. Helen, I went to Berklee School of Music and studied jazz there, and I love jazz. This was one of my early loves, and I was playing jazz as a teenager, and I loved jazz, and I went to Boston to study jazz, but then I fell in love in writing music for theater and dance and films. So I changed my major in Berklee from jazz to film scoring. So I had originally this sensation of how music affect people, and how, like you said, every interval on the piano or every musical interval has a different color and different impact on our psyche. I felt it, and I had some excellent teachers like yours that told me about it. I had a wonderful composition teacher back in Israel before I came to Boston who taught me the modes, how the Ionian mode, the Dorian mode, the Phrygian mode, each of the modes have a different color and it's a different psychological world. And when I came to Boston, I learned about modal jazz and how jazz musicians in the 50s and 60s start composing with modes. And when I finally got to study film scoring, I got to take a couple of courses in psychoacoustics, which is the science of why we interpret a minor second as dark, or why do we interpret a Phrygian mode as dark
Is it
than
because the
major?
frequencies are clashing with each
So
other because they're
there's
so
so
close
there's
together?
friction. Yeah, there's more
Yeah.
tension. So there's more
Yes.
tension, and then there's more accordance for certain frequencies,
Like a
and
unison or an octave.
right, and fifths and thirds and all that. And sometimes it's historical. Sometimes in a certain period of time, the thirds was considered dissonant, and 400 years ago, and now thirds in the last 300 years, thirds are considered consonants. So sometimes it's a cultural shift, but there's things that are set in the human brain, and we interpret the
Well,
same way.
did you guys ever talk about this? Because, technically, the Western European classical harmonic system, everything is, they use the well-tempered tuning, which means everything is a
Right.
little bit out of tune so that different instruments from
Yeah.
different families can play together. And so I think the
Yeah.
fifths are maybe a little bit smaller and the fourths are a little bit
Yeah.
bigger, but they divide the octave equally into 12, you know.
Yes.
And so I love that when the West Africans unfortunately tragically were brought over as slaves, and they took away their instruments except for the drums in the Caribbean, maybe in New Orleans, but they had to learn Western European classical instruments and the piano. And
Right.
there's microtones, there's semitones, I
Right.
mean, in the music that you play, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then just
Like
the,
quarter
like you said, the cultural expression, like they were trying to find the notes in between the notes on a piano. So
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe the part of
Yeah.
the story of the blues in America, because
You have
on
that
the
in the blue
piano.
note. Yeah, the blues. Yeah, the blue note is an in-between note.
Yeah.
The E flat in the key of A, the E flat is in between D and E flat. It's not, so there's that, and interestingly, talking about healing and music, I get many emails from people who are very interested in the tuning that is not Western tuning, and they
Mm.
say, the Western tuning is not good, is not in harmony with the planets and with the universe, and all kinds of things there's all kinds of theories. And I tell them, yeah, there's some truth in some of the tuning system, but I point them to all the studies that were made, clinical studies, scientific studies with music therapy, with how music affects the brain. And all the studies, almost all of them, were done with Western tuning. And it's proving the healing impact on the brain. So I'm telling them, yes, maybe if we tune the piano, if we tune to 436 or 432, and if we do just tunings, those alternative tunings that are more in harmony with itself and with the overtone series, that may be a good thing for our health and the health for the planet. There may be that possibility, but still, even music in Western tuning at 440 with the well-tempered clavier, the way Bach tuned the piano, even in that current tuning that we are stuck with, there's incredible healing impact on the brain and on the body.
Oh, I love hearing that. I would love to learn more about that. I mean, I personally had interest in, music therapy has been around for a while, but I think the study of how music can help those with Alzheimer's or dementia. That
Yeah.
was of special interest to me when I was at the Zuckerman Institute, and I got to work a lot with a neuroscientist whose work had been in memory, and she told me about a conductor who suffered a traumatic brain injury, and he could not form any new memories. Like
Mhm.
he forgot, like the minute his wife left the room, he would forget who she was, and but he
Mm.
remembered how to conduct choral music. He was a choral conductor.
Incredible.
And this neuroscientist connected me with a wonderful organization in New York City called Arts and Minds. They primarily serve those with dementias and their caregivers through visual art programs and experiences. So we came to them and said, would you like a musical program? And they said, sure. So we partnered. We did a lot of online things during the pandemic. And our first in person concert was during my residency, which was in 2019. But we gathered them all in this room, and I taught them this. I'm sure you know that since you are a jazz artist as well. The piece, it's called Duke's Place or Sea Jam Blues by Duke Ellington, and very simple lyrics. And there was one of their clients who he was one of their first clients, and he had become pretty non-responsive. But he was there sitting in his chair, and then the lyrics are the same thing, you know, blues, 4 bars, 3 phrases, same thing. So we passed around the mic thinking if people would want to sing the lyrics. And when it got to him, he sang the lyrics, and it was
Yeah.
so like people were crying, and it was just really,
Yeah.
really powerful that, that this music is from his
Yeah.
youth,
Yeah.
and this brought him, reintegrated himself for that moment. And I
Yeah.
think that is invaluable and so meaningful. And again, part of the healing, even though it did not last, unfortunately, right? But the fact that you can still, I think, it's great for his family too to be able to be with him
Yeah.
again for a minute.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to learn about the
Yeah.
frequencies that you were talking
Yeah.
about, and just,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
maybe I can share some jazz now with you guys.
Please, please.
Um,
It's good for our brain and for our memory.
well, I think jazz has definitely made me a better person, maybe my brain better too. So,
Definitely.
I don't know that I have any uh, w- reaction in mind, except that I just want, I guess, the listeners to really uh, just enjoy and be moved by the music. I actually was a classical pianist for most of my life, and when I was almost done with my undergraduate education, jazz hit me, and I was like never the same. So I was like, what is this? I got to find out more about this. So I just feel, jazz has been used by, the great creator to make me a better, if not the best version of who I could be. And so I just, it heals me every time I play, and especially I feel like in today's day and age and the times
Yeah.
we live in, I think moments like how you started the webinar are very important to
Yeah.
still our minds, because the cacophony of the constant noise and the tension and the strife, I think it's
Yeah.
important to just be still and go to ancient places.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Indeed.
so let me get my input down, and let's see what happens.
Okay. Beautiful. Wow.
Thank
What
you.
what a
Thank you.
treat. What a treat. Thank you for this. Yeah.
So that first song was something I wrote called Everybody's Waltz, in keeping with I feel like the commonalities we all have as human beings, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's Waltz. And then
Yeah.
the second piece is by one of my heroes on the piano, the great Jerry Allen, her piece called Feed the Fire, which I think speaks
Uh-huh.
to the fire that burns in all of us,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
creative. And the we are all creatives. We were all gifted this amazing ability to create and um, put
Yeah.
these sounds in different combinations, even
Hmm.
though with this instrument we only have 12. But we try and we keep reaching, right, for those in between notes and
Yeah.
those
Right.
special places.
Yeah, what struck me is the architecture. The music is like architecture in time. It's a
Mhm.
structure, and the structure of the piece you played, and in jazz in general, jazz and what you played is so complex. The structures and the rhythms, it's complex. It's a lot more complex than a simple pop song, and it keeps flowing like a river, like a river. If you can think about a river that keeps flowing, that's a very complex structure that keeps changing and keep evolving. And jazz is like that. And I'm being reminded of a study that was done in John Hopkins University, where they used jazz with senior citizens, and they studied how listening to jazz every day for this group of people affected their cognitive ability, and they found that listening to jazz improved their memory and focus and concentration and comprehension, all the cognitive faculties. So there's real scientific evidence that it's particular jazz improve memory and cognition. And I've been thinking about why. Why is it? And all I can, because neuroscientists don't know yet why jazz is doing it. They found also that jazz and classical music have health benefits for plants. If you play jazz and classical music for plants, it's good for the growth of the plants. If you play heavy metal for the plants all day long instead of jazz all day long, or classical music, the plants start to
Oh darn!
die.
So it's not because I have
They,
a green thumb; it's because they're
no,
listening to my jazz records.
yes, it's the jazz. Good vibration. So, the only thing that I speculate from all that I know and all the research that I look at, is that it's the irregularity and complexity of the architecture of jazz. It's very complex rhythmically and melodically and architecture over time. And the complexity is very invigorating for the human brain. Imagine the brain has to perceive and receive these complex structures through the time that you're listening to, that it's like a fitness. It must be like a fitness for the brain. While
Well,
if the brain listen to simplistic things, if you feed yourself with simplistic structures all the time, repeatedly, you're not going to challenge the brain. And so,
this might be another way to think about it. One of the neuroscientist at the Zuckerman Institute who co-founded this artist in residency position, he's studying something so amazing. He's studying consciousness. What is consciousness? How do you study it scientifically? How do you look at the brain in terms of that? And he's so brilliant. He said he just published a paper and he's waiting for the community whether to tell him he's crazy or I can't wait to read the paper. But he talks about the arts, and he's a jazz lover. He's an amateur guitarist. And he talks about how consciousness for him, and I'm probably not saying this correctly or completely, is that how we communicate to another person what's going on inside of our brains. And we can think of it very on a simple level, like if I want to tell my boyfriend, please go get the cup in the kitchen on the top, the blue cup on the top shelf of the cabinet. Like just saying that, he knows in his brain where that is. That's a very simple example. But when you're playing in a jazz band, and I know you've experienced this, I think it's a musical representation of human interaction. Like,
It's a
we didn't
conversation.
meet this before. We didn't meet before this webinar, and we're having a conversation. We're having dialogue about some pretty complex stuff. We're not talking about, please get me the cup from the upper part of the cabinet. So jazz musicians were this is something I really had to learn and grasp coming from the classical world, where as a classical pianist, it's a very solitary experience, right? Even if you're playing a concerto with the orchestra, it's still, they're one unit behind the pianist. But to be on stage and to be vulnerable because you don't have control of what's going on, right? There are two, three, four, five, up to a big band's a little bit different, but I usually play with a quartet, four different spirits, human beings who have different backgrounds, different views, different ways of feeling music, right? The way we feel it, it's there's a range. It's not like just one thing, and so we have to come together and make a groove work. And I think that's what, for me, that's what really, basically, I feel like jazz artists, we live at I call it the leading edge of creativity, because in its best form, you really don't know what's next, right? Like, we didn't plan out our conversation. We're responding to each other. We're throwing the ball back and forth. And that's what we do on stage. And maybe that, I think human
Yeah.
interaction
Yeah.
is it, right?
Yeah. Helen, it's really important that we emphasize, based on what you're saying, is that of the value of music making, because it's something that I always share with my students. One of the neuroscientists that I work with, Mark Robert Waldman, wrote the book How God Changes Your Brain, and it's not about God; it's about how spiritual practices changes the brain. And one of the studies that they cite in that book is the difference between music making, like what you do with your band, what I do with my band, and what other people do when they play. They play music. An orchestra is a great example. The value from a neurological point of view is so much higher than listening to music. While passive listening to music has a value for the brain. So listening to music, listening to complex music, classical, it can be complex rock, it can be anything complex, would harmonize you, and anything beautiful, anything that you considered beautiful and harmonizing, gonna have a peaceful, relaxing value for your mind, which is good for your health. So there's the aspects of relaxation and lower anxiety, lower depression when you listen to music that you consider soothing and beautiful. And
Well,
then
like when
there's,
you were
yeah,
playing, I felt like my
mhm,
brain was
yeah,
unfurling and
yeah,
opening up again,
right,
It's
right.
cool.
So there's definitely positive impact for listening to passive listening to music, but the research shows that if you engage in music making,
Mm.
there's even more impact on the brain and more healthier brain. So the brain of musicians is a different brain, just like the brain of meditators is a different brain than regular people. And if you look at the brain over 30 years of making music or 30 years of meditating, they find there's more gray matter, there's a more healthier, stronger brain. Because of the music making and because of you can be a great musician and abuse yourself and do drugs and alcohol and talks, ruin your health. But we're talking about people who live healthy life and make music versus people who have healthy life and listen to music, and people who are healthy and don't listen to any music and don't make any music. Out of those three groups, the people who make music would have the most benefit on a healthier brain for a longer period of time of their life. It's really, 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 I mean, it sounds obvious. Like to me, it seems obvious, but it's good that we have the science to confirm this, that,
Well, I
you know,
think it's
it's,
going to confirm it more and more. And I
yeah.
think we should go to Capitol Hill and teach some people music.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely, definitely. I mean, yeah, I would decree a music
Everyone
camp,
has to learn an
a boot
instrument
camp.
before you can serve.
Right, right, definitely, definitely. By the way, I have a friend named Jonathan in San Francisco who is an organist, and he started a nonprofit organization to bring music into diplomacy and politics, to use
Wow.
meditation and music before any meeting, and to see how this would affect. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's incredible how music, talking about education, if we could get every child to make music, every child on this earth to study music and to play music, how good it would be for their memory, for their learning languages, learning math. There's plenty of studies showing the positive impact of music on children and education, along with fitness. Like doing sports and playing music could be so good for every child. It's lowering aggression, lowering hostility, lowering negativity.
Anxiety.
Yeah. So I'm definitely an ambassador for this approach that I wish every child on this planet will have the benefit of music education and music making.
Well, I mean, gosh, thank you for what you do and continued best wishes. And um, should we open it up for questions, or I
Sure.
don't, I'm not
I'd
sure
love
what.
to have some questions.
Yeah, if there are, if not, we can
Mhm.
keep talking.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
um,
I wanted to mention to you one project that combined jazz piano and brain health, in case somebody is interested, and you may be interested. I've been involved in creating music in 40 hertz for 40 hertz sound therapy, and 40 hertz is a low tone. It's 40 pulsation a second. It's like the low E1 on the piano. It's the lowest E on the piano,
Lowe's
but
E on the piano. This
the
E.
lowest, right. So that's E1, right? Is that
Mhm.
E1?
Yes.
So that is actually 41 point something. So 40 hertz is in between, it's almost quarter tone. It's in between E and E flat. But it's not exactly 100% quarter tone, but it's almost like 51 out of 100 cents. But we can think about it as a quarter tone lower than the note that you just played. But it's a bass note. And it was found in MIT studies and in various other studies that tone, exposing people to that tone, 40 hertz, for an hour a day over 7 days, and of course over a longer period of time, improve memory, clear the memory pathways, and can prevent dementia and Alzheimer if you do it early enough. And this is really cutting edge. It's not out there yet. It's only in the universities. It's not available
Well,
commercially yet.
have you heard
But
of something called the open focused mind? Oh,
no,
gosh, I can't remember the name
no.
of the scientist. He's the one
Open
who
phone.
coined the term flow state. And he
Uh-huh.
talked about the amplitude of our brain waves and that, there are different levels. And I think the healthiest one is the one that you're talking about. Maybe it's not exactly the same.
Mm.
That there's one that is very narrow focus and it's very productive. You get things done, but it's very expensive on our nervous systems, and how we should really live at the other one, probably the 40 hertz one that you're talking about, because he gave the example of looking at lions and lying on the African savannah, how they're just,
Mhm.
lying there flicking their tails, but then the herd of gazelles come and they turn into that close focus and
Mhm.
get their thing, and then they go back to the open
Mhm.
focus where they're looking at the whole. Um,
So these are different state of mind, right? Different
yes,
brain state of
yes,
mind.
yes. I'm
But
so curious. I wonder if that's
yeah.
related. I'm going to read that book after. I'm going to look at the book.
Did he correlate it to certain music frequencies? Those
No,
states of
no.
mind?
He just
No.
equated it to just, I guess, physical things. Like when you're close focus,
Uh-huh.
you're,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
more,
Yeah. Well, the
whatever.
the way the way the 40 hertz sound therapy works is that the vibration of 40 hertz activates a cleaning crew in the brain that
Ah,
clears clears something called plaque. They call it plaque. It's like a dirt that sits on the memory pathway. So you have the memory. People who have dementia, they have the memory, but they cannot access it because the pathway to the memory is blocked by plaque, which is dirt. That just over time, we have more and more and more dirt sitting on the. It's like dust. They call it plaque. Amyloid plaque is the actual terminology for that thing that sits on the memory pathways. And for some reason, some people later in life, their cleaning crews stop cleaning that. We all have a cleaning crew at night that cleans and the plaque off so we can
Oh
remember
no,
who
I need
we
to get
are
more
in the
sleep
morning.
because it happens when we sleep,
Sleep
right?
is very
Probably.
important. Sleep, that's
Oh my
one of the reasons
God.
sleep is very, very important for
Okay,
memory.
you convinced me. I gotta get more
You
sleep.
have to sleep well. It's really, really important for memory. So, so
That
the
sounds
40 hertz,
amazing.
yeah,
That's
so
fabulous.
the sound gets the cleaning crew to clean the memory pathways, and that's 40 hertz. But the scientists who discovered it, the way they give it to people is through listening to that annoying. Could you demonstrate? Could you just play like 10 times E1 just annoyingly loud or something? Okay, great. Thank you. Now, now imagine if you have to listen to that from a
I suddenly remember my
synthesizer.
childhood phone number. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But imagine that you don't have a lovely pianist like you with a great grand piano playing it, but you have a synthesizer tone playing that.
You mean it
And you have
doesn't
to listen.
matter just as long as it's
It
40
doesn't
hertz, it
matter
works.
as long as it's 40
I'll
cycles
take
a
it.
second.
I'll take it.
So people
Oh yeah.
listening to it, yeah, people listening to it, and it improves their memory.
I'm
But
gonna give it to my parents right
you,
away.
you should look up 40 hertz music. If you put my name next to it, you're going to find 7 different albums of
Okay.
beautiful music with that tone, including one album with jazz piano. And the jazz pieces are performed by Ruslan Sirota, a great jazz pianist. But that is where what I'm doing and what you're doing has a certain kind of a meeting point with the jazz and the memory thing. And but
Yeah,
jazz
I
by
don't know if I
itself
wrote
improves
anything in
memory.
that. I don't know if I wrote anything in that key for my next album. I'm gonna go check just in case. But Gabby, apparently, she says there are some questions. I would like
Oh,
Gabby to ask
excellent,
them if that's okay.
excellent.
Absolutely,
I,
absolutely. I'm sorry to interrupt this
no
great
problem.
conversation, but one attendee asked, how do you envision the future of music as a tool for wellness and education?
I mean, I think it already is being uh, used in that way. I think as science, I mean, I feel like you've done a lot more in this arena. I think the benefits of music are undisputed. I think maybe it'll be applied in ever more specific and focused
Mm,
therapeutic ways, maybe more
mhm.
codified, more
Yeah,
I guess because music can. I feel like there is magic in music. I don't know which you can ever parse that down into its atoms, right? When I was in school, atoms were the smallest particles, but now I don't think that's true anymore.
absolutely.
And I feel
Yeah.
like music is that way. Music can. I love. My partner says music changes the molecules in the room, and I think that's true.
It's
But
probably true. Yeah, it's
yeah.
probably true. It's probably true. Well, I think, as I said it, I wish every child on this planet will have, 20 years of free music education and the music instrument and music in the schools, that music will be as important as math and sciences, that every kid, not just a musical kid, but every kid, just like sports. Everybody have to do sports. It's good for your health. Everybody should do music. It's good
It's
for our
good for your
health.
health. Exactly.
Exactly. It's good for our health. It's good for our nervous system. It's good for our emotion. It's good for our imagination. It increase higher grades in math and sciences. It's good for everything. So that's what I would do. I would start with education, and then, slowly getting music to be used in hospitals and in therapy, in clinics. To do it more and more and more. because it's non-invasive. It's not something, there's no side effects. It's not addictive. It's really pure organic form that can be used as medicine.
I love it.
Yeah. Gabby, is there any other questions?
Yes, we do have more questions. Another question is if you found differences in cultural music traditions and their healing properties. For example, does the brain react differently to African rhythms from Native American music or Indian music for that matter?
Well, I know of a couple of studies that were done with different cultures, and it didn't really matter which culture it is, but what matter is the musical elements, meaning the rhythms, the speed of the music, the harmony, the melody, all the musical elements that affect the brain. That's what matters. It doesn't matter which culture it's coming from. But there's a really interesting study that was done in Scandinavia where the music therapist who, music therapists go to school, they study 5 years. They're like a doctor. They have to study 5 years in the university. They know everything. And they work in the hospital. Okay, they did a study with them where people in the recovery room after surgery, the music therapist chose the music according to what they learned, what is the best healing music to get people to recover from a surgery. Okay, that's one group. The second group had no music. The third group, the patients themselves, before they went to surgery, chose what is the most soothing, beautiful music that they know of. And that is the music that played in the recovery room for them. Guess what? The patients that had no music in the recovery room stayed in the hospital the longest and had the most amount of drugs for pain. Painkillers, the most amount of drugs, the longest stay in the hospital. The second group that the therapist chose the music for them, the music therapist, had stayed less time in the hospital and less painkillers. But the third group that chose the music for themselves, they left the hospital even earlier and even used less painkillers. And from that groundbreaking study, we found out that people know more than the music therapist. People know about what pleases them and what soothes them. And one person hates jazz, just hates jazz. It irritates them. They can't stand it. They love classical guitar. What can you do? That's what they love. Some people love my instrument, the oud, the oud that I play, Middle Eastern oud. Some people think that it's the most depressive, annoying sound. And some people, they just go high listening to this sound. So this has to do with the culture and the subjectivity. If you relax and find Indian music, sitar Indian music soothing, or African music soothing, that would help you recover from trauma. That would help you sleep. That would help you relax. If you have another kind of music that soothes you, that is what you choose. So that's the element of subjectivity and cultural differences. How you grew up, what you heard in the belly, what you heard in your childhood, so that is important cultural differences based on upbringing.
Well, I love that. That's fascinating. I think then
Yeah,
I'm going to bring it to birds because they
yeah.
were saying how I got to work with a neuroscientist who studies bird songs. All birds make sounds, but some species actually teach distinctive songs, generate father to son, father to son, father to son. And before they hit puberty, they're both the male and female birds, their brains are pretty similar, but once they hit the neurons in the audio cortex of the female brains get switched on to listen, to evaluate, to judge, and the males, because they both sang before, but the males, who can sing the best, he wants to court the female wants the best male. So she did this fascinating experiment where she put the egg of one species of a bird into a different species nest to raise these birds and see if they could learn the songs of the wrong
Uh-huh.
species. And it did. She raised
It
the first
did.
bilingual bird in the world.
Uh-huh.
But the crazy thing is the bird, so it's that mystery. So the bird sang it in the cadences and rhythms of its original native species, not ever having
Uh-huh.
heard it. So I said, "Well, what happened to the poor bird? Did he find a mate?" And she said, "No." And she said, "Don't worry, they live a very cushy life as bachelors in our bird room."
Yeah.
But I
Well,
mean,
well, this is very
that
interesting. Yeah,
that makes
very
sense that the
interesting.
therapist wouldn't know as much as the patient because
Yeah.
like you said, the connection we make with the music that moves us is very personal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. Genetics and the environment, how
Yeah.
it both works.
Yes,
It's in
exactly.
the working of both.